Hi Tara, my name's
Hi.
Christopher Mills. I'm from Popped. Honestly, it's a pleasure to meet you. Just watched the film not long ago, and it was honestly funnier than I could have imagined.
Oh, that's awesome to hear because I don't consider it a comedy. So it's nice to know when people are laughing.
That is going to factor into one of my questions, but the first question I will ask first, how does it feel to have this film be a part of the BFI Flare Film Festival?
Oh, it's so exciting. We missed the mark with our first film on BFI Flare. We didn't get in, and I was so sad, but we would have been able to go. So I'm sort of
Yeah,
I think it was supposed to happen this way because that was a COVID time. And just to see I didn't know how excited everyone was there for it because there's so many festivals, there's so much to do in London.
there's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, so when you go in and you see sold out, sold out, like even including us, and no one knows who we are. I think it's very exciting, and it's sort of like nerve-wracking to imagine being in an audience that's full and interested. So like we're very stoked to be coming over.
This is such a sidetrack, but I wanted to ask you your cat's name because I just see your cat
Oh
behind you.
yes, so this is her like window of being fed, so that's why she's sitting there. Her name's Gertie.
Oh, Gertie. Okay, it's a
Yeah,
pleasure. Gertie too there as
yeah,
well.
Gertie.
And I wanted to ask, from your last film, Compulsus, to making this film, obviously that film is much more serious. I've not yet to seen it, but I can tell from reading the description and
Yeah,
also what you said in the past that compared to Lakeview, it's two completely different films. But
yeah.
to ask you personally, um, the actual differences between making Compulsus and making this when on set and writing as well.
Yeah, there's sort of night and day. So Compulsus was made under a program called Talent to Watch, which is a Canadian funding program. It's a micro budget. So it was specifically written to fit a certain budget, which was $200,000 in the end, like all told. And we shot it in 15 days
Okay.
at like in between COVID lockdowns. So we were fully masked, rapid test didn't exist yet. If anyone had gotten sick, it would have ruined everything. Like there was no time to get back. There was no money to shut down. Luckily, it all went fine. But what happened was, um, right after we finished shooting, we went into a lockdown, so the editor couldn't work on it because she's a working mom and she had her kids at home. So I had all this creative energy that I was expecting to go into post and it had nowhere to go. So I just started writing Lakeview because I had worked with these actors, but not for very long, and
Yeah.
was just starting to get into a relationship with them and starting to get into a good flow. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if they could do something that was funny? So I
Yeah.
just started writing this ensemble. Yeah, we got funded in 2022, and the budget was closer to $1 million this time. So a lot more money and seven more shooting days. So it's 22 days versus 15.
Okay.
And it's immeasurable the amount you learn on the first thing to take to the second thing. It's just like you can't even really quantify it.
Yeah. And then also, I mean, that's good that you told me how many days because I was going to ask compared to Compulsus how many days this took to shoot, but 21 to 15. Um, it's not like I'm surprised you shot Compulsus in 15 days during COVID and everything. Honestly, it's a big feat
Yeah,
to to say.
it was wild. Yeah.
And obviously 21 days for Lakeview, but it must have been so much fun shooting Lake.
It was really fun. So we were mostly, we were at the house for most of the shoot. We had 4 days at the bar, which was an area yacht club. And I mean, that sounds fancy, but it wasn't fancy. It was just basically one giant room. And then one day we were in the city to film the musical sequence with Dax. But we were mostly in the house and everyone was in the house. So that house has 3 levels. You never see the basement because we were in it. Like
Yeah.
that's where production was, that's where craft was, that's where there was a sound bay down there, like costumes. Everyone was there. So we were all together all the time. Which can go both ways, but
Yeah.
luckily we it was like just a lovely autumn in Nova Scotia and everyone was having a good time and we were all having and there were night shoots in there too and that can always mess things up. But yeah, everyone really got along and we had really a lot of fun.
As a director, as a filmmaker, does directing become easier for you personally when you're writing your own films?
I think so because when I'm writing the script, I think about how I'll direct it. So there's a lot of direction in the scripts, which maybe you wouldn't do if you were just writing it on spec. So I feel
Yeah.
like I've already thought about a lot of it before we even get to the shooting part, and the actors have read it too. So there's less conversations happening day of because I think that's sort of a waste of time. Like obviously, if you need to talk about something in the moment, I'm happy to do that, but what's my motivation and where are we and what's going on. Like that's all things that should have been worked out before we stepped on set. So I definitely I put a lot of like looks and feelings and how sort of character maps in the scripts themselves.
So earlier on, you said, you're surprised when people say how funny they found the film, but it's essentially this lesbian ensemble comedy.
Hmm.
How different is this final product from the first ever draft of it?
It got really sad as drafts went on, and then when we got funded, our funder said you need to put more jokes in here. So it kind of dipped and then came back up. So the first half is quite funny, but then it pretty much settles on sad for the back half, which is a nice balance. I'm happy. I'm happy with it. I did have to be convinced by our editor, Amy, who is a comedian by practice.
Mhm.
She'd cut it like a comedy, and I really pushed back on it. I was like, no, we need more space, we need more silence, we need more awkwardness. And then we sent it out for notes, and everyone was like, the pacing is weird, there's too much space. And I was like, Amy, you were right. And she didn't gloat. So that was nice.
Is that version of the film still something you'd want to do? Not essentially like, a different Lakeview cut, but maybe another film in the future where you can essentially do what this film was originally supposed to be.
Yeah, I think so. I think I my next film is a romantic comedy, but it's more romantic than comedic. So I guess, yeah, it probably will be more dramatic.
I was gonna ask later on about if you're working on anything currently. Is there anything you can say about this rom-com that you're working on at the
I
moment?
mean, it's all fake until it's real. That's how I always feel about movies. It's like I could tell you six things and they might happen and they might not. But yeah, it's something I'm in development on. It's called Joe and Frankie, and it's like a 90s studio comedy that Nora Ephron would have directed, except it's with two women.
Okay, I mean the sound of studio comedy I love. So I'm hoping that this is something that we get to see soon. Honestly, I can't wait to see
Me
how that.
too. Sorry
And
about that.
no, that's all right. And then I was gonna ask, I feel like it's so important, obviously, like me as like a black man, obviously, when I'm watching, say for example, black movies, it's always nice to see, black cast, black crew,
Mm,
you black writers on the movie. And I think it goes the same when we're looking at LGBTQ movies as well. You want to see the same people represented, not just on screen, but behind the camera as well. I
hmm.
was wondering how that experience was for you with Lakeview.
We for both films we intentionally tried to fill all our key positions with women or non-binary folks whenever possible. Queer is a bit harder because we're in Halifax, which is quite a gay place, but it's a small place, so it's like queer sort of like a bonus thing.
Mm,
But definitely certainly women were prioritized, and I would say I think we're like at 90% women.
yeah,
On the shoot, they're like four or five guys, all really nice guys, but they're definitely in the minority. And there are no men on screen at all.
yeah.
Even in the background, like in the background note, I put that in. And it's like no men. We're pretending they don't exist for this
It's
story.
in this fictional world, men just don't exist.
That's right.
It's just a world of women.
Exactly.
I mean, there's you got the mention of I guess he's not really mentioned actually in the film. We just know that she's going through divorce. So even then, there's no mentions as well. So that is actually
Exactly.
that's
It's just
quite clever.
there's one line and Telefilm made me put it in, which is like, was Darcy married to a man or a woman? And I said a man, and they're like, well, people need to know that. And I was like,
Yeah.
do they really? But she says he early on, and that's it. That's the one pronoun.
Honestly, it works. Like you don't even while watching a film, you don't even think, oh, like this is just a woman full of. I mean, a woman. This is just a film full of women. It's just it works so perfectly. It's not something that you really know. It's in the back of your head really when you're watching the film, and I think it works so perfectly in the script and on screen as well. Um,
Awesome.
my next question I was gonna ask is, what was the hardest scene for you to shoot?
Oh, the hardest scene. The fight that Dax and Darcy have at near the end
Yeah.
was quite difficult because I initially wanted it to be a 360 fight, but if you think about the house is half windows.
Mhm.
So my DP Chelsea was like, I can't give you that. I can't give you 360. I can't give you full, but I can give you half. We can do 180. So there was that, and then also that fight took place at like 2 in the morning, and
Mhm.
it was a closed set. Like it's like I feel like emotional intimacy is just as important as like sexual intimacy in terms of
Yeah.
like have as few people around as possible. And I wanted Hillary, who plays Dax, and Leslie, who plays Darcy, to like have the freedom. I didn't want them to worry about the camera. I didn't want them to worry about hitting the lines every time. I just wanted them to really like dig in and find the fight. So and it's an emotional scene, and it's one that I've lived through, so I sort of sat them down beforehand, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to be during this scene because it's like bringing up some stuff for me.
Yeah.
And so that was certainly the most emotionally precarious. It turned out great, and I got a wealth of material out of it. I think we did 16 takes, which is like not normal. Like
Mm.
16 full takes. I usually do max out at 4. But yeah, it was certainly in design and in performance, it was just the most sort of particular.
You mentioned Chelsea Kamau, your cinematographer. I wanted to obviously shout her out because besides the humor in the film and just how real these characters felt, there's two other things that I love about the movie. And the first one is the cinematography. And
Yeah.
especially as you can see behind me, this scene in particular in the bar when we get to Dax performing is just my favorite scene in the entire film. And I wanted to ask you how it was, filming that and collaborating with Chelsea on this movie.
Chelsea's awesome. She and I met just through the Halifax film scene, and I said to her, I want this film to look like Dirty Dancing, which was shot on film in 1986. Which I'm not even sure Chelsea was alive then, like barely. And so she's like, yeah, okay. And she did it. Like it's soft and it's romantic and it's like gauzy, which is what I wanted. And shooting this bar stuff, it was fun because it got us out of the house. So it was like a little side quest that we all got to do. We had all these extras that was new, mixing with the cast. It just was like, it was a lot going on, so it was a bit more stressful.
Mhm.
But she loved this stuff. Chelsea obviously loved this stuff because you can see there's lots of color, there's lots of different kinds of light. There's the disco
Yeah.
ball, there's the practicals, there's the film lights. And she had a really, really great team, and they loved designing this, and they loved designing as well as our production designer Jen. They loved just like making this and the Dax the scene that goes into the fantasy scene. They love making that happen too. It was just different from what we were doing every day. So it really like it boosted people up.
I mean, even it feels different in the movie because you go from obviously before the actual performance, you cut to performance and it feels like a different movie.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're watching like a musical or music video all of a sudden, or once we get to that.
Yeah, we called it the music video, like amongst ourselves.
And I mean, that's exactly what it feels like. So I'm glad that you like, had that little, inside joke behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask, what was, obviously you told us what the hardest scene for you to shoot was. What scene did you have the most fun shooting?
The most fun, and this happened on the first movie too, was there's a little montage early on where all the girls are like the on the first night where all the girls are like drinking and doing stupid shit.
Mhm.
And that was it. It was none of that was scripted. It was just like, okay, you each have a task. Like the Julies have a task, Darcy has a task, um Phoebe and Lauren have tasks, and then everyone danced together. And the song was It's All Coming Back to Me Now by Celine Dion. And that was at the end of a slate of night shoots, and mostly everyone was pissed off. They were like, "Let's stop this. We're like tired. We want to go home." But it was really fun for the cast to do, and then it was really fun for Amy and I to put together and post because it's like you have things like that are so free and feel so real, and it really felt like they were friends, which I needed to establish early on.
Yeah, and then I mean, also to add to that, I mean, even you you jump into this film not really knowing who any of these people are. They've had a life before we obviously begin this film. We hear Lucy's just broken up. Um, oh, like the way we kind of hear like presumptions of who Dax might be before we even get to see her. There's a lot going on, and I feel like the film works perfectly into actually letting us know who these characters are, their relationships, and like there's so much back and forth in the film, but it just works so perfectly. You think everything's resolved, and then the next minute everything comes falling back down again. I think it works perfectly. And then I was also going to ask you, do you have the same when writing? Was it as hard to I don't know how to word it, but was it as hard essentially the scene you found the hardest to shoot? Is that
Mhm.
also was it also the hardest scene to write?
That's a good question. That one was, yes. I don't know if that would be true for every movie, but
Mhm.
yeah, it was one of the later scenes I wrote in the film, and I knew I knew it was sort of like the Dax Darcy relationship was not at the forefront of the draft for a really long time, and then it
Yeah,
flipped. And so when it came down to actually having Darcy return Dax's advances and then it all fall apart, I was like, okay, you're gonna have to write the falling apart part. Or it's
yeah.
like, why else are you doing it if you're like if you're holding back the most emotional parts, there's no point. So yeah, it was a tough one.
And then you said the scene that you had most fun shooting wasn't actually scripted. So then,
Yeah.
which part of the movie did you have the most fun writing?
Oh, I kind of like anything that has a lot of ping-pongy dialogue. So the fight that they all get in at the end where Julian's yelling at everyone and she's just sort of going through every single person, and then it briefly dips out to being like, wait, wouldn't it be clip blocked? And it's like this stupid side conversation in the middle of a fight. It just felt
Mhm.
really funny and like a thing friends would do.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had a ton of fun shooting that too because Amy and our sound designer James had to cut a lot of me audibly laughing out of that scene.
I mean, that's good. It shows how much fun that you had making this film.
Yes, it's not professional, but I think it makes the actors feel. I think the actors are torn because they're like, "Stop ruining my shit," but they're also like,
Yeah,
"Well, at least she thinks it's funny."
yeah, exactly. At least it feels like a family. It feels like a bunch of friends. So
Yeah,
it's similar to the movie. And
awesome.
even going back to one of my previous questions, my second other favorite thing about the film was just the soundtrack and the score. And I want to talk about your collaboration with Siobhan Martin, who
Sure.
composes this movie and works on just the entire score.
Yeah, Siobhan is someone, she's like a go-to side person in the Halifax music industry. So she's in like a dozen bands. She's always on stage, she's always playing, but she's a side person. She's not she doesn't lead anything.
Mm.
And when I was looking for a composer for Compulsus, I wanted a synth wizard, which is her, like piano's her main instrument, and we didn't know each other, and I approached her and we sort of bumbled through, getting a soundtrack on its feet for the first movie, and so for this one, we both had more experience with how to discuss what we needed going in, and I just the only direction I gave her was ethereal synth, which is
Mhm.
not a lot of direction, but that's what it is. And she's very good at knowing when to step out, like when to drop out the music and when it can help. And she's got a ton of callbacks and themes and all in all her music. And then the soundtrack is all local, all Halifax musicians, and you can actually get the soundtrack on Bandcamp. Um, and I will be bringing some CDs to London.
Okay.
So if I can find you, I'll hook you up if you have a CD player in the year 2025. And
I'll happily get a CD player just to listen.
that's amazing. And so it really felt like it was really important to me to just infuse it with local music because that's a part of my scene as well. And so it was really awesome to have both of those elements work together. And we actually got an award at the Atlantic Film Festival for the music, like as a collaborative effort. So I'm really happy with how it turned
That's
out.
great. That's great to hear, honestly.
Yeah.
And then I was gonna ask, are there any movies you'd recommend to someone probably like myself, just starting to explore queer cinema? And maybe some of these movies might have influenced the way, you either write your films or direct your movies.
My favorite lesbian movie is called The World to Come, which was written and directed by Mona Fastbold, who you might know as Brady Corbett's wife.
Yeah.
And it stars Vanessa Kirby and Catherine Waterston, and they're like lesbians in an old time when you're not allowed to be lesbians, and they both had kind of shitty husbands. And I think it's really underrated. Obviously, Portrait of a Lady on Fire is a big one. And I was just in Australia and I saw a documentary called I'm Your Venus, which was about a woman named Venus Extravaganza, who was one of the people featured in Paris's Burning,
Mm.
which is a seminal documentary about the ballroom scene in New York from the 80s by Jenny Livingston. So I recommend all of those things. Um, and Booksmart. It's
Oh,
like
yeah,
Booksmart's quite gay. You've
yeah. No,
probably seen that.
I have seen Booksmart. Yeah, I
But
did.
I remember when I saw Booksmart, I was like, if I'd had this movie when I was 16, I would have come out a lot earlier.
I definitely think like it's good that we're getting having these films more in the spotlight to help
Yeah.
younger people. Obviously, there's a time right now in America where things are seeming quite dark, so it's good
Yeah.
people have these films, to feel seen, and to feel loved as well.
Definitely. I'm very scared for our American friends. They're losing rights every day. It's really
Mhm.
terrifying. But yeah, it's awesome. And it's gonna and that's why, to circle back to your very first question, it's
Yes.
also why I'm super stoked to come to BFI and to see such a large festival that is focused on queer film. It's gonna be really awesome.
Honestly, it's my first time attending, and I'm planning. I've like created a list of a bunch of films I wanted to watch. Your film was on there as well, and then I got sent the email asking, "Do I want to, review interview?" And I was like, "Yeah." I jumped at it straight away.
Nice.
And your film is the first film I've watched for the festival as well. So
Awesome.
I've started on a bang, so I'm excited. Uh,
Terrific.
and then I wanted to ask my final question for now, or not for now, but my final question is: who is your favorite character in Lakeview?
Oh boy. Um, so it's probably Julian. So Kat McCormick, who plays Julian, has been in all of my things,
Mhm.
um, all my shorts and my first feature. And people think she's playing a version of me. Like I had a friend who was doing background, and she came up to me at lunch and said, "Is Kat cosplaying as you?" I didn't give her a glasses string.
Yeah,
But she's the funniest one, I think, and she's also sort of cranky, which I am too, and she's sort of just like had it with everyone in their dramatic nonsense. And so yeah, it changes every day. It's like your cats or your kids,
yeah.
you know. Depends
I,
on the day.
and then, although I said that was my final question, you mentioning her just made me come up with another one.
Yes.
In the film, we find out that she's pregnant, and everyone starts to make a joke about who does the sperm belong to, and they don't ever answer the question in the
I
movie. But I wanted to ask you since I have the chance:
know.
is it someone? Is it someone that actually has a name? Is it someone that we know, or is it just like an inside joke for them?
It was a running joke. We rented the piano from the in the movie from a guy named Dr. Piano. So there's actually a line that we cut out because it was too funny, where someone's like, "Who's the father?" and Kat goes, "Dr. Piano," and I was just like,
Oh,
"This doesn't make any sense." So it was a running joke,
honestly,
but no, it's no one we know.
I mean, I think it worked in the film, and the fact that it came running back to me when you mentioned Gillian. So, but honestly, Tara, thank you so much for your time. I love the film. It was a
Thank you
great,
so much. I really appreciate how
great.
your thoughtful questions. Can I ask you who your favorite character is?
My favorite character is between Darcy. I do like Darcy, but also I like Dax a lot because I feel like when it's the way Dax gets introduced into the film when she first enters. You got a motorcycle, the license plate says Dax, um, and then she's not really the way you think she's going to be from how they were talking about her
Hmm.
beforehand. Because they all assume like, oh, she's going to go for Phoebe, like, oh, she's going to try hook up with
Yeah.
Phoebe, and that causes a whole separate issue in the film. And I just kind of you can tell from the start that it's like she wants she wants Darcy. Like you can
Hmm.
tell from the way she's looking at her, the way she's talking to her. And I was just fascinated just by her entire story. Clearly, like how she's been brought up. Her You kind of get a bit of like who she is away from them, like with her music career and just all of that. I don't know. I loved her character. She was my favorite.
That's awesome. Thanks.
But honestly, thank you so much, Tara, for your time. I enjoyed this interview. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it
Uh,
was dope.
Hopefully, I get to see you while you're in London.
Yeah, yeah, let's try to connect.
I will email around try to get the CD. I'll try to get the CD for.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, I'll say one for you for sure.
honestly, thank you so much, Tara.
All right. Thanks, Christopher. Take care.
Take care.